Alright, YouTube, it's Chris Bergstrom from Bushido Photo, and today I want to talk to you about the equipment that I use for off-camera lighting, and also discuss some of the different types of lighting to get different looks. And I'll kind of show you by looking at some of these pictures, and you guys can comment if you're here. And hello France, Jose, good to see somebody in Europe. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment in this comment section. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and talk like I would on a normal tutorial. So today, let me switch over here. Alright, so I'm going to talk to you about different types of lighting, the modifiers that I use. I'll actually show them to you at the end of this video. But I really want to talk to you about the different quality of light and how you're able to achieve this in a small studio. And so I use a lot of times my house for my studio if I don't have a big location shoot somewhere. And so what I'll end up doing is just taking out furniture from my living room, sliding it into another room, and then set up a background stand or two. And then I'll have one background that I can shoot on that's one color or one pattern, and then another background on the opposite wall. So I actually have two shooting locations in the one space. And so what I like to use is seamless backgrounds, you know, so where there's no floor, where you don't see the edge of the ground in the studio. And you can see in this photo right here, this is actually a lavender colored 10 feet by 20 feet background from Denny Manufacturing, and it's this really nice material that it resists wrinkles. And so the way I keep them from getting wrinkles is I use this fabric steamer, and then I just steam the wrinkles out, and it takes about 10 minutes prep time, and then when I'm done I just fold them up and put them in a closet somewhere. Alright, so that light that you see on this photo here is a 50-inch Westcott Apollo softbox. That's the big square softbox. You can use a speed light, you can use a studio strobe inside of it. Like I use Godox strobes now. I used to use Alien Bs in the past. I sold all my Alien B equipment and I went with Godox because I wanted the ability to use one trigger with Nikon at the time. I'm shooting Fujifilm now. But I was looking for, all right, we got some questions here. Let me get to you in 1 second. So I switched from Nikon to Fujifilm, and I wanted something that would work with Fuji to get all my speed lights and all my strobes to work at the same time. So the background that you see in this photo is actually lavender. Sorry for my loud keyboard. I have one of the clicky keyboards. So that's a lavender background. It's a big soft light. It's a single light source. You can see the shadow down here on the bottom. It's very soft light, and I have the light off at a little bit further maybe than 45 degrees, so between 45 and 90 degrees to the subject off to the side, and up high because I'm always looking for getting shadows underneath the subject's chin. So I don't want the light so low that the shadow just cuts across or it's lit underneath here. So I put the light up a little bit high. My ceilings are only about 8 feet high, so with these big modifiers I have to sometimes get creative and tilt them so that they're actually at an angle. So let's take a look at the next photo. Alright, so in addition to just shooting on backgrounds, like this looks like it was in some big building somewhere, but this is actually shot on a blue screen or green screen. I don't remember which, probably green since his uniform is blue. You always want to avoid having the same color in the subject if possible than your chroma key background. So chroma key, green screen, blue screen, it's all the same thing. And so what I use is On1 Effects, and they have a really good background removal tool. You can also use the pen tool, which I do use on occasion, but this type of image, since it's got pretty clean lines, his hair is very there's not a lot of frayed hair sticking out everywhere, so it's pretty easy to trace around this with the ON1 10 software. It's the layers plugin that comes with ON1. So that's pretty much it, and then I just use stock images or take photos of different backgrounds from all my travels all over the world. And for this one I was going for that kind of Blair Bunting look, which he overdoes the micro contrast in a lot of Discovery Channel work that he does. So I went for that kind of look. It's almost HDR looking, but it's, you know, a high school senior playing soccer, and he really enjoyed it. His family loved the photos. So here's another one, same thing, green screen, just added this background in post, and that's pretty much it. I can show you how to do it, but that's for another tutorial. This is just showing you how I get my studio up and running. Alright, so this shot here, this was actually on white seamless and not paper, but an actual muslin background. So you get the same look that you would get from paper, except that the muslin lasts a lot longer. And a lot of people, they complain about getting wrinkles. Again, use a fabric steamer and just take the extra time to steam out the wrinkles, and you'll get it looking like this. There's also a trick that I learned from watching Phlearn.com. That's Photoshop Learn, PH Learn. And they teach you how, well, in one of the tutorials on YouTube, they showed how you can use a median filter on a copy of this layer. And so you just say, make a copy of the layer, and then you say, make noise median. And then once you do that, the whole image kind of gets like really flat looking. And then using a layer mask, you just mask out the subject or paint over the parts that you want to cover up on the background. So that's one way. If you don't have the time to get all the wrinkles out, or if you miss some down here on the floor, you could actually go ahead and do that. Same thing, white seamless background. I love Japan, which is where I'm currently staying right now. I'm living in Tokyo, and I like this Japanese umbrella. These in Japan are handmade, and they cost about $300. But I always like that for kind of a portable handheld background. And then white seamless in the background. Another large modifier. This is probably the 50-inch Westcott again. It could be the 35-inch Westcott Zeppelin. I love Westcott products, so that's the majority of my modifiers. I have a few other ones that I use, but those are the go-to modifiers that I like. Alright, so here's another green screen look. This is a kind of a recreation cosplay of the baby doll character from Sucker Punch, the movie, and this is an actual replica sword from the movie. It's like 1 of 500 made, so that's pretty cool. And she just went and found this schoolgirl outfit in Tokyo and started wearing that, so that's pretty cool. And then rather than having the blonde hair, I just went out to eBay and I found this pink wig, and I kind of like the way that looked. Oh, and so how did I light this? So this one was lit with the 35-inch Westcott up high, aiming down, which is why you get the shadows under the chin. And then on the floor, which you can't see, she's actually sitting on this big wooden box. And down on the floor I have a 47-inch reflector, silver side down, and I aimed a speed light at it so it would turn the small, speed light into a large light source by bouncing that up. And you could actually see the shadow on her hand from this wood is cutting off the reflection from the actual reflector down at the bottom. And then you see on her knee here, it's also blocking it from this wood. Ideally, I would have not liked to have seen those shadows, but again, this was green screen, just trying to do something fun here. Alright, so this is studio lighting, but on location. So I'm out in Odaiba in Tokyo, and this is the famous Rainbow Bridge in the background. And it was just after sunset. It was pretty much getting to be dark at this point. The lights on the bridge light up like rainbow colors, so I just used I think it was a 28-inch Westcott softbox, kind of up high and to the left, and then used a slower shutter speed to bring in the ambient light in the background, and also shooting at a f1.2 on the equivalent of an 85mm lens. That allowed me to get the bokeh in the background, these round circular balls out there, and I think that turned out pretty good. And these are actually battery powered Christmas lights that run off of like 1 or 2 AA batteries. They're little LEDs, and so she's just holding them, and this model's from Russia, so I meet a lot of people out here in Japan. Alright, so this was a Japanese actor, and basically this is a 3-light setup. I have a light beyond 90 degrees behind the subject, firing back at him to get a rim light, and then I have a light on his shoulder in the background to separate him, and then basically it looks like a grid spot right behind his head aimed at the background. And then the texture I added in Photoshop after the fact, and then what I do is I add the texture layer over the top, and then I use a layer mask and just paint around the subject to make sure that I don't get the texture on the actual subject themselves. So just to create some texture, instead of having just a plain background every single time, I'll use these textured backgrounds. Alright, so this one, it's kind of the same thing as the last photo, except that the light is more at like a 90 degree, which is putting this shadow on her face right here. And then the background, you can see it's all wrinkly on the ground. I didn't take a lot of time to get those wrinkles out, even on this background. This is pretty much how it looked straight out of camera, except for a little color grading, you know, just changing the colors in the shadows. This is a 1-light shot. I don't think I had a light separated on the background, and then I just added this little glow over here in Photoshop. So that's pretty much straight out of camera, except for a little bit of hazy glow up there. Alright, so this one was shot in the studio, believe it or not. This one was 3 photos merged into one, so it's a composite shot. So I took this shot in the background in Alaska with a Nikon D800E, so it's a pretty high-res image, and I was focused on the foreground right here, which put these mountain ranges in the background slightly out of focus. And then I just shot my subject in the studio against a blue or green screen and cut them out, put them on here, and then I added 3 or 4 layers of snow on different layers so that you actually get the depth. So some of these particles of snow are more in focus than some that are either closer to the camera or further away from the camera. And that's pretty much it. I lit her at beyond 90 degrees, so the light would have been behind the subject. You can see that. I like to do that a lot. When the subject is looking left or right, I like to have the light behind them so that you get dramatic shadows on the side of the face. And what I see a lot of like new photographers do is they'll just aim the light at 45 degrees at the subject, and then pretty much the entire face is lit. So if you think about where to place the light, kind of keep it at 45 degrees to the nose. So if the subject turns this way, have it 45 degrees on the opposite side, which will cast shadows on the side of the face. And if you want to bring those shadows up, just add a little bit of a fill light, and that's what I'd recommend. Another one, same studio session. This one I cleaned up the background in Photoshop, I think, because it's the same background. This one's actually the lavender background, not the white background. So I did switch it out, and that's probably why it's less wrinkly. This is kind of funny. So there's a magazine, Sal Sincata's magazine. I think it's Shutter Online magazine. Pretty awesome. So one of my shots, which is this one in the left-hand corner, actually made it in the magazine last month. So I was pretty impressed that I just kind of got shown in the magazine. I got a copy, of course. It's kind of cool to show your kids. Alright, so this one's pretty fun. So this is all straight out of camera except for the makeup on her face. So the umbrella, the lighting, the hairpiece, the background, white seamless, that was all straight out of camera. However, her face didn't have any of this makeup at all. So I basically used a layer mask and painted white, and then I use blending options. I don't remember which blend mode I used, so that you actually can see the texture under the skin. And it's very important when you do this to ensure that you don't paint around the eyelids, because if you do the actual inner part of the eyelid, it starts to look pretty fake. And then I painted on the lipstick here. Also, don't paint over the teeth with white because it's going to look really fake. But this looks just like you would see painted on geisha or maiko, Japanese kimono ladies in Japan. All right, another shot. This is a one light, and I've got a spotted background back there that it's made by Westcott. It's basically a bunch of splotches that are made with bleach that they spray all over it. And this is a flower crown from fashion accessory maker Fiore Couture. She's out of San Diego or LA area, and she does a lot of shows and stuff in Paris and New York and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool to have this piece. And then of course it's just one light off to the side, large light source. I think this was a Soft Lighter 2, which is a 60-inch umbrella with the diffusion panel on the front and a Godox AD600 strobe firing into it and then bouncing back on the subject. So you can do a lot with one light. And then of course I added this little glowy effect up here. I do that sometimes. It's kind of trendy now, it's kind of getting old, but I still do it just if it adds something to the photo. All right, that's my business card. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and I'm going to actually show you some of the equipment, and then we'll go ahead and see what we can do from there. So I'm going to switch over to the other side of the studio and show you some of the gear that I use. Alright, so here's my awesome model we got today. I'm not going to be doing any shooting. I just kind of put her out here just to let you know that there's two things that I would recommend if you're a beginning strobist photographer, you're getting into lighting or whatever, is you may not have access to models and your friends. You may be kind of like just starting out. You may have moved to a new area, so you don't know a whole lot of people. And I remember when I first started out, it was kind of weird being a guy and asking for female models, because I like to shoot ladies more than guys. I do shoot guys, but I like to make women look feminine and beautiful because that's what I enjoy doing. But I remember putting ads in the newspaper, going on to Model Mayhem, and I didn't really get a lot of traction with hardly anybody. I would basically put an ad out there saying, hey, I'm looking for a model so I can, practice my work and then give you the photos and maybe build a friendship over time. But a lot of them, I think they think you're looking for a girlfriend, or maybe you're a creepy weird guy and they don't know you. So it's hard to get out there. So what I would recommend is if you don't have any friends, get a model, like dummy, whatever you want to call this, mannequin. And then that way you can practice the shape of the lighting. So that's step one. Is if you can't get some friends, family members, or find models to do it, there are a lot of paid models that you can get, but when you're just starting out, it's hard to pay to learn your craft. So getting a mannequin will be a big help. The other thing is to get some kind of LED lights. I use these Godox SL60 watt. This is what's lighting this video right now. And so what I've got is a gigantic, I think it's a 60-inch Octabox over here, and that's made by Photodiox. That's pretty huge. And then I have a Godox 43 or 42-inch softbox on this side, both with constant light. So when you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out how do I shape the light, before you even get into turning on a strobe or a speed light, is to use these soft boxes or grid spots to see what the light is doing on a subject's face. And if you take this mannequin, and you actually, so I'm going to block the light from this over here. You can see it's really nice 45-degree lighting. We've got basically Rembrandt. It's got highlights here. This whole side of the face is lit, and as you turn the subject, you can see now it's like split lighting. So that's 90 degrees to the subject. So being able to see what the light is going to do before you even stick a strobe into the softbox or light modifier, this gives you a lot of options to play around with and actually see what the light is going to do before you even start. So some of the things that I use a lot of Bowens mount gear. So I use this little, I think it's made by Neewer, looks like Newer with 2 E's. Bowens mount, and it also allows you to attach a speed light. I can attach a Godox 8360, the 8200. These just happen to be Godox TT600 speed lights. And these speed lights are only about $50 or $60. So they don't recycle the fastest, but at $50 to $60, I can buy like, you know, 5, 6, 7 of these things, and if they break on location, it's not the end of the world. Like, you know, if you're losing a $500 Nikon speed light or even the Fujifilm speed light, that's a lot of money to throw down the drain when your stand tips over. So this allows me to put this in all of my Bowens mount gear, and it works really well for me. So that's that. You're going to need something to trigger your strobes with. So since I'm in the Godox family of lighting, I use either the XT32, the X1T, which is kind of like a Pocket Wizard shape, like their TTL version, and then the Cactus V6 II. You don't need all of these, but with the Fujifilm system, I was not able to get high-speed sync without using a Cactus V6 II. But the good news is that I've already got one shipped. It's on the way, coming here to Tokyo. It's a Godox TT350F for Fujifilm. So that's basically a mini speed light that goes on top of your camera, talks to the hot shoe, figures out all the high-speed sync stuff, and then I can control all of my strobes in different groups. I think it's channels A through E, and so that works for me. But if you don't have or don't want to use Godox, you can use this Cactus V6 II, and it is cross-brand compatible. Also does TTL cross-brand. I don't use TTL ever, maybe during run and gun wedding stuff, but even then I try to avoid it. So the reason for that is shot to shot, it's not the same exposure. So, and if I'm aiming a speed light here and my camera is where you're at, it's only going to see the light from here from the camera, and it's going to overexpose this light because it's not flat onto the subject. So then you have to do exposure compensation with the flash and try to make it work that way. But it's really, TTL for me is only run and gun, and that's it. When I'm doing studio work or even on location with studio strobes, I'm always shooting in manual mode. So these are some of the tools that I use to trigger my flashes, and they work with all of my Godox speedlights and my 8600s and my 8360s. So the 2.4 gigahertz or megahertz system, yeah, it's gigahertz, so that system works pretty good. Alright, so again, since I use Bowens mounts, this is a Bowens mount made by Bowens themselves, and this is the Fresnel 200 spot attachment. And I was at CP Plus in Yokohama not too long ago, and I saw this was being sold, the exact same light modifier by Profoto. And I was like, I talked to the Profoto tech person there, and I was like, hey, that's exactly like the Bowens Fresnel 200, and they swore to me at the booth that no, Profoto designed and made it, and they own it, and this, that, and the other. Well, I saw it from Bowens first, so I'm just saying. I just thought that was pretty funny. So this right here is a Fresnel lens, really big size. I think it's like 8 to 10 inches, somewhere in that neighborhood. It's made out of glass, and it has an adjustable aperture inside of it, so you can focus the light to a beam or you can spread it out, and there's this little adjustment dial on the top, and I don't know if you can probably see that. Let's see if I can show you that. So right there, it has this little adjustable aperture, and it has cooling vents, and it's pretty heavy, so if you're going to use this, you're going to need to have sandbags on your light stands, and this basically creates like a spotlight effect that you would see from George Hurrell or any of the old-fashioned photographers. Now that thing's pretty expensive, so if you don't want to buy something that's that expensive, you can go with a 7-inch reflector with a honeycomb grid spot in it. And this, they come in different degrees, so like you can get one that's pretty spread out but it creates a circular pattern, or you can get one that starts to narrow in to where they're basically like a super spotlight. Like I could just spot this part of the subject's face. Or I can bring it out a little bit wider, spilling some on the background, or I can get the whole entire background, creating a vignette around the subject. So that's why grid spots are kind of neat. You can control the direction of the light in a tunnel of light that comes out, and it doesn't get into your camera, creating lens flare. All right. So I bought this a couple years ago. This is the same thing. This is just a cheap Chinese knockoff Fresnel. It's got the same glass element as the Bowens, but it's hard plastic. It's actually built pretty well. I mean, I wouldn't drop it on the concrete because you might break one of these tabs off, but it's also Bowens mount, and as you bring it out, it's going to focus the beam of light in. As you make it wider or bring it in, it's going to spread the beam out. And because of the Fresnel lens that's on the front, it actually creates this nice quality of light. Instead of it just being a solid spotlight coming out, it actually like sends the light out kind of in all directions. It's like a diffusion kind of. So that works pretty good for me. So this is the AD600. Again, I use the Bowens mount manual version. This is no TTL. Comes with a pretty robust flash tube on here, and it's 600 watt seconds, so I can overpower the sun with this, and it works seamlessly with my radio triggers. So this is what I use when I'm in the studio or when I'm trying to overpower the sun. The good thing about it is that it has a modeling light, so you can actually see what the light is going to do. Again, I recommend starting with LEDs that have a Bowens mount or that you can stick inside of a softbox, so you can start practicing on light shaping, how high to put the light, what angle, what degree from the subject that you need to put the light, and it's just really going to step your game up, because a flash fires for a fraction of a second, and if you're not using a strobe that has a modeling light, you can't pre-visualize what the light is going to look like. So with a speed light, it's only on for like tens of thousandths of seconds, and that being is you're not going to be able to see exactly what the light pattern is. Yeah, you could pop off some test shots real quick, or taking a shot, but you won't be able to pre-move your light and see what the light is going to do. So that's what I recommend. All right, so another tool, sorry I keep having to bend down because I don't have a big table right in front of me. Another tool that I like to use is the Light Blaster, and basically you hook up a fast aperture lens like 1.4. This is an f2 35mm. That's about the lowest aperture I would recommend, because what it's doing is if you're going with like a f4 f5.6 lens trying to blast light through this with a speed light, it's not powerful enough to project without having to boost your ISO up. So this f2 lens, 35 is not super wide, but if you go with a wider lens, it starts to distort the image on the edges like you would get just taking a normal photo. So it comes with these little plastic adapters that you can take, you can open it and you can slide these gobos in between there, and they make all different kinds of shapes, which is pretty cool. This one's actually kind of fun, this little circular one, so you can create a really hard edge circle. And what I try to tell people when they're getting into the Light Blaster is all it really is a projector with something that your light is projecting through. So that's the gobo in between there. So it's just like a projector screen. So you're able to focus with the lens. If you have a zoom lens, you'll be able to zoom in and out. This is actually, they make them for Canon mount, so I had to get a small skinny adapter that went from Canon to Nikon, and I'm just using this old 35 f2 Nikon lens, and since I don't shoot with Nikon anymore, I might as well use my old lenses for projecting images onto my background. You can aim this at the subject, and I just did a photo shoot yesterday where I had smoke machine going and I aimed this back behind the subject, and it blasted a bunch of, like, it looked like leaves were, you know, the sun was shining through the trees, or light was shining through the trees with smoke. And anytime you're trying to light smoke or anything that's in the actual atmosphere, you want to shoot from behind so that it scatters the light in the particles. If you shoot from this way against smoke, you're not going to see it very well. It's just going to look like muddy. So that's what I'd recommend if you're using that light blaster. And so the last little bit of gear that I'll talk about that I love is having a light meter. Now, the way I use the light meter, if I'm going to meter this side of the subject, the light is on that side. I'm going to actually aim the light at, or the light meter at the light this way. I don't meter this way unless I'm trying to get an average of two lights, but what I'm trying to do is see how powerful this light is, and when I take a reading, it's going to tell me what aperture at what ISO and shutter speed I should set my camera to. So instead of taking a test shot relying on the digital screen on the back of the camera, which a lot of times isn't exactly accurate, the light meter is always accurate, especially once you calibrate it to your camera. So take a meter reading, set my camera, start shooting. There's no test shots, there's no trying to guess, well, it looks like it's properly exposed. Even looking at your histogram, it can still look off, because if I've got a dark background back here or a bright background, it's going to throw the histogram all over the place. So what I recommend is just use a light meter. And this particular one, this is the L758 Cine version, so it's made for cinematographers. You can actually switch this part over to where you have a viewfinder and you can aim it at a specific point, like a spot meter, and then you press the test button and it fires the strobe if you're using Pocket Wizards. Or I have my camera around my neck and I press the test button on my strobe. So I'll aim this at the cheek, press test, you know, press test on the light meter itself as well. And then I'll get an exact spot metered reading off of the face, because when I'm shooting people, the most important thing is the face and the skin tones. I don't want to overexpose the skin tones. So I haven't been at the chat room, so let me take a look over there and see if there's any questions. If not, then we'll go ahead and end this video, and I hope it's helped somebody out there. And I appreciate you watching. I see we got Jose from France. Thanks for checking it out. All right, so I'm going to end this video. I'm shooting this all with constant Godox LED lights, and I've got one Yongnuo here, and there's a blue Yongnuo in the back behind my iMac. I just like to create dimension and mood. Same thing you would do with strobes, creating this effect. Now, of course, if I was shooting this as a photo shoot, I wouldn't want the light necessarily in the shot. But anyway, I hope this has helped some of you. And again, if you have any questions, leave comments in the comment section. The next video that I plan on doing a live tutorial will be with an actual model, and I will walk you through step by step how I set everything up. And again, that's what I want to do, is to help make you a better photographer. So when I started over 20 years ago in the film days back in high school, this was about 1988, so I've been shooting for a long time. I didn't have anybody that really walked me through it. I had a few books, but reading and doing and watching are two, three totally different things. So if I can help anybody out there up their game and get to the next level, then I've done my job, and that's what I hope to do. So anyway, I'll catch you all later. Have a good one.